Ad Astra per Aspera. That's the name of the episode of Season 2, Episode 2 of Strange New Worlds. We'll talk about it after this. Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd, and this episode is one of a few that talk about what the ideals of Starfleet are, and it's all in the name. The Latin for "in the stars there is redemption," and the idea, the optimistic progress that humankind will make as we go into the stars is what Star Trek has always pushed. They mentioned it in the original series on a number of occasions. In the episode featuring Edith Keeler, where she says in a sermon to the soup kitchen that by way of some sort of spaceship, we'll go out into space and we will cure all diseases and relieve all of despair. And that's really what Star Trek has always preached, really. And they did that in this episode as well. Something that I noticed in the decoration of the Starfleet courtroom was the IDIC symbol, the infinite diversity and infinite combinations symbol, which was a circle with a triangle in it. It was a medal that was made for Spock to wear during one of the original series episodes. Roddenberry really put it together so that he could sell it in conventions. But as it is, it has been one of the tenets of Star Trek, in that infinite diversity and infinite combinations is what society in the future is like. And that speaks to this whole idea of different people being feared. And as always, Star Trek storylines are holding a mirror up to our society, although this one is drawn rather broad. You could say that Una represents Jewish refugees during World War II, or apartheid in South Africa, or any kind of race relations that happened in this country and other countries in the world, and even to the point of LGBT representation in the current society. But it tends to bring in all of the different prejudices and fears that we've had and wrap it into this episode. Now, one of the things that is problematic about a show that is a prequel to other shows is the incredible amount of canon material in Star Trek. What can you do without violating canon? And by the same token, how do you make an episode like this work when you know, when I was a kid, I used to worry about, what was going to happen to whatever character in a show that I was watching, and my mother would remind me, well, they have to come back next week. And true enough, that's the situation here with number one. She's got to be back next week, so we know that she's not going to be thrown in prison for 20 years. We knew that before we knew anything else about the episode. So what do you do to make it interesting? To make it interesting, of course, you have to have some way that she gets out of it that is novel and is believable, and in the case of Star Trek, fits within canon. We know, for instance, that people who have been genetically modified are taboo all the way up through the 24th century. This even making the type of artificial life forms that were popular during the late parts of the 23rd century became illegal after a revolt by them during the events that preceded the first season of Picard. So with all of this, it shows that we cannot really solve the problem. So how do you do that? And it says something about the legal system. If you look at how actual legal cases work, you don't change the world in one case. You generally poke little holes in it. And in this case, that's what they did with Una Chin Riley. There was a matter of a technicality, which has often been bad-mouthed in any kind of pundit circles. But the fact of the matter is, just about every legal case is based on some kind of technicality. Well, here is the law, but the law is not absolute, but that the law is a flexible thing in order to take into account other things. For instance, it is illegal to go up and punch somebody. It's called assault and battery. But if you are doing that in order to protect someone else, it's okay. And so that is the nature of how they were able to resolve this situation. It was done in a novel way, but not a way that changed the world, not a way that changed canon, but rather a way that you could see that the judge panel did not want to throw a distinguished Starfleet officer in jail, and yet they needed to find some kind of legal way in order to do it. You can't just ignore the law. Although a point is made during this that the Prime Directive, which is one of the biggest laws they've got, somehow always gets violated almost every time that it's mentioned. They, in her cross-examination of Captain April, we see 3 times that April violated the Prime Directive. We know that Pike has done that in the first season 2 or 3 times. Kirk did it every time he talked about it in the original series, and perhaps the Next Generation was the one that violated it the least, at least by comparing by the number of times they mentioned it to the number of times they actually violated it. But even the rule follower Picard did violate the Prime Directive in order to save Wesley Crusher at one point. So these things are the nature of the law. You can write down the words, but the reason that there are courts is so that you can fine-tune it. You can see that a law cannot be absolute or it's not a good law. It's something that has to take into account motive. It has to take into account of other factors in order to work. Otherwise, it's so rigid as to be dictatorial. So that's kind of the way they're trying to put the Federation in, while kind of holding up a mirror to society as it is. And you can fill in your own discrimination story in this because they made it so broad. You really can't tell if they were trying to say something about gay people, about Jewish people, about black people, or just the fact that there are people that have been marginalized in our history. So that's the story there, and it was well told. It was well done. The set, which was a redress of the Starfleet Command set in Discovery, was well done. Didn't look so much like a courtroom, but what is a 23rd century courtroom supposed to look like anyway? So otherwise, I think that it worked. They pointed out, once again, that there are some disagreeable Vulcans. It's interesting that M'Benga can tell what by body language, what the Vulcans are thinking, much to the surprise of Ortegas. And in fact, Spock comes in and apologizes for the outburst, which is a funny point. So that's our take. It's all ended nice and neat, and number 1 is back on the bridge, and we look forward to what they come up with next week. So I'd like to know what you think about this. Please subscribe if you have not done so to this channel. I would appreciate it greatly, and click the like button if you like what you see, and let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments below. And until next time, when we will have another retro review of Deep Space Nine of the original series, and then the next episode of this one next Friday. Don't go far.